All right, so welcome everybody. Today we'll do a sequence I'm just calling Easy Yin, and just the idea is gentle Yin practice works the hips and the spine to some degree. No particular focus for today's class, and the idea is to pick relatively easy postures. There's one posture in here that I think might be challenging for people, but otherwise I think it should be fairly easy and straightforward. All right, so let's go ahead and start, and we'll start with a just coming onto our back. And we'll start with a banana pose. So to do the banana, okay, so we come onto our back. And to do the banana pose, which is our first posture, we'll move our hips over to the right edge of the mat. That's just so we have room to position our body. Send our arms up overhead. We're going to grab the right wrist with our left hand, and we'll pull our arm over. Okay, and then we take the left leg to the left, cross the right ankle over the left, and we're looking for a stretch here. So if you don't feel that, you need to be a little more aggressive. So maybe you move your upper body over like that. Now I feel a nice powerful stretch in my waist and ribs. All right, you shouldn't be in pain. So if there's pain, you might alter your position slightly. Change the position of your arms, change the position of your legs. Just don't lose the stretch in your right waist and ribs. Okay, so take your time, but gradually make your way over to the other side. So again, it's not essential to move your hips to the edge of the mat, but it just allows room for your legs and your arms to stay on the mat more or less as you move. And again, how aggressive do you need to be? It just depends on your flexibility. When do you start to feel the stretch? When my teacher, Paul Grilly, introduced me to this concept, it was a game changer for me in terms of teaching yoga. Before he taught me that, yoga postures were sort of a mystery. What were you doing? What were you trying to achieve? You were trying to look a certain way. That's how many people were teaching. And once I understood it's how a posture feels that is important, that the feedback you get, how the body feels when you're doing something, that tells you whether or not the posture is activating certain regions, certain muscles, certain energy channels. It's that feedback that really is most valuable. And so we need to listen to our body in that way. We need to listen to that feedback. And so again, here is where we want to feel the feedback, the stretch along here. And if we're feeling that and we feel safe, then there's really whatever position our body is in to produce a stretch here and to feel that what we're doing is safe. That's all that's important. All right, let's go ahead and come back to neutral now. And we will rebound, which means we just relax for a few moments. Okay, let's go ahead and pull our legs in. We'll give them a little squeeze. Shake it out a bit, move around a bit. This is called the leg cradle. And the idea is just to bring a little bit of relief. So a little bit of movement, a little bit of stretching in different ways. We'll usually do that. And then to come up to seated, we use what we call the hinge, and the hinge helps to stabilize the hips and the spine, which are the two areas in Yin Yoga that we temporarily destabilize to help to strengthen those areas. So to do the hinge, we slide our hands under the hips, palms down. We extend the legs up. Now, if there's any pain in your back, you're just going to bend those knees until that pain goes away. Otherwise, you keep your legs straight, lift your head and neck, take a nice deep breath, exhale, lower the legs toward the ground. Just before they touch, pause, inhale, pop the legs up, and then use the legs for leverage to pull you up to seated. Okay, our next posture is going to be the half butterfly pose. And this is a fairly standard hamstring stretch. So my left foot comes to the inside of my right thigh, and then I just fold right over my right leg, and I want to feel a stretch right back here. Okay, so just a gentle stretch, and we let the back round so that we also can stretch back here a little bit. Maybe you've done some yoga classes where the teachers told you to fold forward with your spine straight, even one of my classes. So that isn't something we always want to do. So it's not like a rounded back is always bad. If the teacher is telling you to keep your spine straight, then there was a reason for that at that time. But there's not a rule, at least not in my teaching, where you always need your back straight. Sometimes we want it straight, sometimes we want to round the back, just like anything else in life, right? There's a time and a place for almost everything. And so we don't want to become too rigid, and this is something I sometimes see in yoga. Sometimes I'll have students, no matter how much I tell them that it's okay to do something, because of another class they took or another teacher they studied with, they are very reluctant to let go of that rigidity. And this is something I notice with human beings in general. Just we can get very scared of getting outside of a certain box, certain rules that we've been told. And that creates a lot of fear, and oftentimes it creates a lot of judgment as well. And so again, if we can remember that there tends to be a time and a place for almost everything, where something that was wrong and bad in one context, in another context can actually be a good thing, then we can relax, and when we find the situation calls for a certain kind of action, we can do that action without worrying about it. And then when there's another situation where we don't want to do that action, then we just don't do it. But again, oftentimes we human beings, we tend to think in terms of strict black and white, right and wrong, 10 Commandments type thing. This is wrong, this is good, always. This is bad, this is wrong, always, whatever it is. So try and keep that in mind, because I find that this applies in life in general, but definitely in yoga. There will be times where the same action, the same instruction, the same idea that in one context would have been injurious or ineffective, wrong, in another context is actually the right thing to do. All right, I know it's the first time I used the gong in today's class, but we'll use it and switch sides. We're doing 3-minute holds today, which might feel a little short for long-time practitioners. For newcomers, it might actually feel like a very long time. So this is a nice beginner-friendly class. Okay, so let's go ahead and come on up and we'll relax for a few moments. Okay, let's bring our legs in. We'll give them a little squeeze. And let's come on up to a seat. Okay, so continuing on, we'll do a square pose here. So I'm going to give you a few options. I don't want you to get confused by the options. So if the first option I give you works, then just don't worry about anything else. Just do that first option, okay? So the first option is just this. You sit with your legs crossed, right leg in front of the left, and you come forward. And what you want to feel is a stretch out here. A satisfying stretch, a safe stretch, but a satisfying stretch. So if you don't feel that, the next thing to try is you take your right foot and place it over your left knee, which would look like this, all right? Now it's not a lotus, so sometimes I see people doing this foot way back here, or maybe more common, I see this. Okay, we don't really want this knee flying in the air like that, hanging out like that. It's not necessarily, you know, going to injure you, but it's just a kind of a little unstable. Also this, we don't want this, okay? So if that's happening to you, I think this is a lot better for those people like that, with that knee way up in the air. So if you can really stack the shins, then great, perfect. Come forward, and then again, we're looking for a stretch out here, a nice satisfying stretch. Now the one problem that can happen here is in either of these first two variations, you feel a pinching here at the front of your hips. We don't want that. Okay, that can be injurious or dangerous over time. So many people get that. And so if that happens, what I'm going to recommend is you do this instead, which we call shoelace. This is something we do much more often in my classes, the shoelace variation, okay? So the first choice is a square, what we call a square pose in Yin, which is this or this. These are both square pose. So again, if you can do that, do that. If there's pinching, then, or you don't feel a stretch here, then do the shoelace instead. All right, so let's come on up and we'll switch sides. This is the square or alternatively shoelace pose, depending on your body. Okay, so this is called tension. This is a stretch, and very often that's what we are looking for when we're doing a yin posture. Not always, but very often it is the stretch that we're looking for. Less often we're looking for what's called compression, which is what you would feel here at the front of the hips. Now, I don't ever want you to get into, again, the inflexible mindset that compression is always bad, because this is another thing that I hear from yoga teachers, things that, oh, you're compressing your back, or oh, you're compressing your SI joint, or something like that. You might begin to get the impression that compression is just this awful thing. Compression happens all the time in our body. It's something that helps keep our tissues healthy and strong. Now, like anything else, whether it is tension, compression, or torsion, you can overdo anything. Okay, so yes, if I have a damaged back, which many people in our culture do, and then I overly compress those tissues, I can cause, say, a herniation in the discs in my back. Yes, that's true. But what started to happen in our culture is so many of us are unhealthy and injured that exercise, yoga, exercise specialists, yoga teachers, people have started catering to the injured. They've stopped teaching as though people are healthy and started teaching with the assumption that everyone's broken. Now, the problem with that is when you teach in that way, what can happen is you end up weakening the healthy individuals. And so one day they end up being injured too, because it's through being strong, strengthening the tissues in our body, stimulating them, using them, that we actually stay healthy. And so without knowing it, while meaning well, I'm not saying anyone is doing this intentionally. This is just from lack of education, from having a wrong idea about how to help people. By teaching to the lowest common denominator, to assuming that everyone is injured and everyone needs a modification, then we can actually end up causing healthy people to become less healthy, or not allow them to get the stimulation to stay healthy. And then they can also end up getting injured in the long term. All right, let's go ahead and come on up, and we'll make our way back onto our back, and let's just relax for a few moments. Okay, let's bring those legs in. We'll give them a little squeeze. Move around a bit, shake it out. And then again, we'll hinge up. Okay, now we change things up a little bit. And we come into a dragonfly. So as usual, for dragonfly, you may want to turn to face the the long side of your mat. That's optional at the end of the day. It's not really that important. As long as your heels feel okay with what you're doing. Now the legs are pretty much as wide as they'll go. So I can't do more than that, and that's because of the shape of my bones here. It might be because of muscular tension. I doubt it. I really feel like there's just not anywhere further to go. In other words, I'm reaching compression. Not tension here, but compression here that won't allow me to go any further than that. Okay? So wide. And now I saw this yesterday when I taught this class. There were a few people who were like this. They were getting pulled back in this posture. We don't want that. So what you'd like is to bend your knees if that's happening until you can come forward relaxed. So gravity is pulling you. You're not pushing or pulling yourself down. Just gravity. If you were to fall asleep, you would end up forward, not on your back, not falling backward. Now, if bending your knees is really uncomfortable, it doesn't work, the alternative is this, which is a butterfly. Okay, it's not exactly the same thing, but it is the same area, which is the groin. Okay, so you'll do that butterfly instead. Otherwise, we're doing this dragonfly here. Okay? Okay, so we come up and we'll transition to a tabletop. You may want to continue facing in the same direction. Again, it really is up to you at the end of the day. So tabletop, hands and knees, and then we take our knees as wide as they'll go. And that's called a frog. You can stay up on your hands, you can come down to your elbows, you can lay on your belly, your feet can be close together or farther apart. they can flex or point. And again, really what's important is what do you feel? We want to feel the stretch in the inside of the thighs, the groin. We want to feel that we're safe and we're free from excessive pain or injury. I say excessive pain because there might be some discomfort here. I wouldn't really describe this as comfortable for me. It feels therapeutic because I'm used to this stretch, and I know that this is afterwards I will feel better. I hope that makes sense. If you like therapeutic massage or sports massage, the massage itself doesn't feel good. What feels good is afterwards, when the muscles are released and relaxed. It's after the therapeutic that you feel better. So yoga is very often the same way. We don't really, I'm trying to think right now, I mean, I don't think yoga necessarily feels that great while you're doing it. There's a lot of things we do in yoga that don't necessarily feel very good while we're doing it. It's the after effect that really, really tends to be the payoff for yoga practice. And this is both in the relatively short term and in the long term. So if we are expecting to always feel good when we're doing postures, or we think we're supposed to like the way a pose feels, this very often is a misunderstanding. And so in yoga, in the ancient scriptures, they actually say that you want to cultivate equanimity. And a great way to do that in your yoga practice is to try and get to the point where all poses are the same in your mind. You don't have a favorite pose. You don't hate a certain pose. All the poses are like medicine, or again, therapy. They're ways of helping you become healthier and stronger and more resilient. And so we let go of the emotional attachment. We let go of our feelings about these tools that we use, and we just use them without that emotional investment. So yeah, like a surgeon with a scalpel or a clasp or something like that, she would just use the right tool for the job. She wouldn't get emotional about the tools. If she did, then she might actually be a less successful surgeon. All right, let's go ahead and unwind. And I recommend for the restorative a child pose.
But not everyone likes this posture, meaning it can actually be very painful for some people, and it's meant to be relaxing. So if that's the case, just choose another pose to relax in, another position.
Okay, from there, let's do a little counter stretching. We'll come up into this position. We call it marauding bear. And we move and stretch a bit. The hips, the abdomen, the back, shoulders, even the neck. And then when you're done with that, you can do a little down dog. Stretching your legs and the joints in the lower part of your body. Okay, from there we'll come forward onto our belly, prop ourselves up in the elbows, and we call this Sphinx. And it's I'd say the kind of prototypical yin back bend. And in back bends, we're doing two things. We're compressing the low back gently and we're stretching the front of the body. So one or both of those effects we want to feel. So hands wide and straighten the arms if you don't feel the posture at all. And you very well may not. Otherwise, you can keep your arms bent and your elbows on the ground. Either way, your shoulders can depress or relax. Okay, like that. Head can be held up, drop forward or drop back. Legs can be together or legs can be apart. And that can really change what you feel in your back. So our bodies, as I've mentioned in the past, they change all the time. And right now I feel a really strong stretch in my abdomen. So I've been doing a lot of core work this week, strengthening the rectus abdominis. And so I'm going to feel a nice strong stretch through the front of my abdomen. Now, other weeks where I haven't been working my rectus abdominis as much, I don't feel any stretch in the front of my body. I just feel the compression along the back side. Now, the important thing to remember is both are good, as long as they are within a range of what is safe. I can overdo either. It's generally harder to overdo stretching than it is compression, but there's an exception to every rule. So please keep that in mind. Nothing I'm saying ever always applies. And this again is why I am really not a fan of dogma and dogmatic approaches to things. Just that has not been my experience. That has not been my training. That's not what I see every day when I teach. There's always an exception. So whenever you hear me say something, know that there's always an exception and that you may be the exception. Your pose that you're doing might be the exception. Your back might be the exception. Okay, so you need to, it's not that we want to ignore what our teachers tell us. We listen, we take it into consideration, but we also need to be very honest about our experience. If our experience isn't lining up with what someone is telling us, then we need to be willing to say, hey, you know, this isn't agreeing with what you're saying. And if someone has had proper training, they will recognize, oh, you're the exception to the rule. And then they will try and help you with that. If they haven't had proper training, if they're just immersed in dogma, then they're going to resist that when you tell them that. They're going to try and blame it on you. And in which case, I recommend you just find another teacher, you find another instructor. All right, let's come on down, take your time. We'll relax for a moment, give our back a break. Just to share with you, I feel a lot of sensitivity in my back after doing that. I don't think that's a bad thing. That sensitivity tells me that the posture had an effect. And potentially, my intention is for that effect to ultimately strengthen those very tissues that are sensitive right now. And hopefully by doing that, those tissues will get stronger and less likely to be injured or damaged in the future. Okay, so I'm again going to give you a few options. The first is simply repeat what you just did, Sphinx or Seal. 99% of the time, everyone can do a version of that safely. Even if your version is like this, you're like barely in any kind of a back bend. There may even be people that laying on their back like this is as much as they can do. That's okay, as long as you're getting a little bit of compression in the back or a little bit of stretch on the front side, okay? Next option is extremely challenging for many people, but it's also extremely therapeutic. So it is a posture that I continue to teach and I continue to encourage people to do their best with, and that's the saddle pose. And so you come up, you can sit on your heels, you can sit between your heels, you can sit on a block that's between your heels, all right? Your feet can point back or out to the sides, your knees can be together or apart. Lots of options to accommodate your body and your body's abilities safely. That's what we want. Okay, it's not one size fits all. We really want to listen to our body and pick something that's going to work for our body. Now, if you feel a strong stretch through the front of your thighs, what I would like you to do is stay seated. Okay? You just stay right here. This is already therapeutic. All right, so it isn't about getting into a particular position. It is about the therapeutic stretch, which you're already getting it. Even though it doesn't look like you're doing anything special, you're already getting the benefit. Now, if you don't feel a stretch, I don't feel a stretch. If you're like me, you don't feel a stretch, you begin lowering back, hands, elbows. You can put something behind you, lay back on that, or come back to the crown of your head or all the way onto your back. This is called a saddle pose. Okay, now I feel stretched in the front of my thighs. I also feel some compression in my back. And again, very, very therapeutic. The amount of compression I'm getting. Could I get too much compression in my back? Absolutely, I could. But for me, given the condition of my back, how often I practice yoga, what kind of yoga I practice, my age, etc., etc., this is a good amount of compression for me. It's going to help keep my back healthy and strong. I'm also getting a stretch and compression in my hips that's also therapeutic. And some would even say that this could potentially be therapeutic for my knees. Now the third option is if neither of those work for you or you want to try something different, you can do a supported bridge. I'm not going to demo it today, but to do supported bridge, you would place your feet on the ground, knees bent, up toward the sky. You'd need a block, a yoga block. You lift your hips up, place the block under your hips. And then what I would like you to do is experiment with straightening your legs out and extending your arms overhead. And you're just trying to stretch the front of the body as much as you can. And again, you're going to probably feel a little bit of compression in your back, okay? So in general, the name of the game is to intentionally and therapeutically stress the body within a amount that is safe for it, but that will also stimulate the body to stay healthy, perhaps become even healthier, and help to strengthen or to stretch it so that it's stronger or more flexible or more resilient, just all around healthier. Now, because in reality, the body and our brain is just simply a part of our body. I don't know why this can be so difficult for us to accept or grasp. But for whatever reason, many people think that, their body and their thoughts are independent of one another and their emotional mood is independent of their body. They think they can eat junk food, not exercise, work at a desk all day, never be outside, watch television all the time, and feel really good. It's just not possible. And the fact that things like anxiety, depression are going through the roof, they're on the rise, is just evidence of this. So most of us have just not been educated to know that movement as well as diet not just diet, but movement as well, is absolutely critical for our sense of well-being. And this is a large part of what I try and educate my students about. Okay, please take your time. We're going to unwind from this posture. How you get out of it is not that important. Of course, you need to get out of it safely, but there are many ways to come out of it. You saw I just released my feet. Some people roll off to one side. Other people sit up and then release their legs. And I'm, of course, talking just about the saddle pose. We'll bring our legs in, give them a nice squeeze, and just shake that off. Again, this movement is called a leg cradle. It's a counter stretch. And then from there, we will take our last posture, which is going to be a twisted roots. And so to do the pose, right knee crosses over the left. I can lock ankles if you want, if you can, but you don't have to. And then we just simply drop the knees over to the left. And I want to do that without rolling to my side. Okay, I hope that goes without saying, but I too often see students who end up on their side when they're doing this posture. Okay, so this is called torsion, rotation, or in more common speak, a spinal twist. But that's what a spinal twist is. It's torsion for the spine, it's rotating the spine. And again, this is just something the spine does naturally, as well as moving forward, what we call flexion, and moving back, which we call extension or hyperextension. What I learned is that all of these movements are absolutely vital and important for us to be healthy. So again, the idea that compression is bad and we want to eliminate it, compressing the back is bad and we want to eliminate it, this is just simply incorrect. Yes, for certain people with certain conditions, that might be bad. But we do not want to normalize that, you might say. And that's maybe not a bad way of thinking of it, is there's so many of us that are unhealthy, it's being normalized. And exercise and yoga is being taught as though everyone is injured. And again, from my perspective, this is a huge mistake, because then we are actually, in a very real sense, encouraging healthy people to be less healthy. We are pulling down healthy people to the level of unhealthy people. And this would be a little bit like, I don't know, teaching a high school class or a college class as though everyone had schizophrenia or everyone had some kind of mental disorder. It's just a mistake. We want to assume most people are healthy, and if someone isn't healthy, then they need to seek the assistance that they need to become healthy, so that then they can take part in these other things. Another perhaps better analogy or better way of thinking of it, I'll give you one in a moment. Let's just switch sides first. Okay, so twisted roots. So if we go back to the analogy of a classroom, a college or high school classroom, and this is one you may have heard me give before. Instead of thinking in terms of mental health, let's just think about what is expected of somebody in that class. And so let's say we're in college algebra, and the teacher gets up and starts teaching, and then a student, the teacher says something like, okay, we're going to add 7 and 6 here, and then we'll do this, and then we're going to divide this. And someone raises their hand and they say, what's addition? What's division? And it becomes very clear that this person has never taken any math. And here they are, they're in college algebra or calculus or whatever. Is it right for the teacher then to start teaching this person addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, whatever it is that they don't know, and make everyone else wait and dumb the class down to a level, the lowest common denominator? Even if there were 12 or 13 people who ended up in that class who had never done addition or subtraction, or they just don't belong there. They belong someplace else. But again, in our culture, unfortunately, when it comes to movement, competency, and health, we are so poorly educated that most of us don't know we're injured. We just don't even realize it. We don't know we're not healthy. We think because we're not in the hospital that we're healthy. I could say we might think because we're not on drugs, but many of us are on drugs, right? And we still think that that's normal and that's healthy. And I'm not trying to make anyone feel guilty for that, but the baseline for health is really not just I'm not in the hospital and I'm not in drugs. It actually is I feel really good. I function really well. My body functions and moves without pain. I can do yoga class without a lot of pain. And these are things that we're losing in our culture. It's becoming normalized to have injuries and be in pain, and to expect the yoga teacher or the fitness specialist to adapt their regime to our injuries and not the other way around. Not for us to get healthy and then come to yoga. Not for us to get healthy and then to try and improve our performance. Now, there's good reasons for this, so I'm not, again, trying to blame you. It's hard in our culture. There are many reasons why. I'm not going to get into it today, but it's understandable why we are where we are. But hopefully with a little bit of education, we can begin to change that. All right, let's unwind from that one. Come back onto our back. Just relax for a few moments. And then you can give your legs one last squeeze. If there's any lingering discomfort, as usual, you just shake that off with a little bit of movement. And then when you're done with that, you'd come into this, which we call a pentacle in Yin Yoga. Any comfortable position on your back, and feel free to use props if that's helpful. And then once you're comfortable, set a timer for 6 minutes and just relax for the next 6 minutes.